Good evening and welcome to this week's recap. I am Star Smart. In the course of the week, we had reports from the home front and a couple of which from the foreign scene.
We saw from our reports that the continued human rights abuse of Amazonians hasn't stopped yet, but we also saw the resilience of their never again interim government, headed by Dr. Samuel Ikomesako, as more moves have been made. We have a recap just in case you missed out on the news, but before we get into the recap of today, let's get some fresh reports right after the break. Well, it is no longer news that La République du Cameroon's totalitarian dictator and his junta are not doing well and reminding the world without proposing any concrete way out of issues. This is what Kamto says. He says it's time the southern Cameroon's Amazonia, the conflict, it's time for it to be resolved because this particular conflict has claimed thousands of lives and exiled over 1 million people. He says it's time for it to be addressed and brought to an end. Now, the question ABC Amber TV is asking Kamto is how and by who.
Professor Maurice Kamto, president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement Party, the MRC, who shares the blame of the octogenarian dictator, having served him as minister unable to salvage the drowning monarch, has said that Bia's government has failed La République du Cameroon in different capacities. He made the declaration during a meeting held last Saturday in the Mendong neighborhood in the colonial La République du Cameroon capital, Yaoundé. He started by mentioning the high cost of living, which has become a big problem for so many Cameroonians today. Since the start of 2023, prices of basic commodities skyrocketed, and this is one of the things that Kamso criticized. Since the end of the African Nations Corp, AFCON, we have suffered the pangs of the high cost of living. I propose a general increase in wages to allow Cameroonian households to gain some purchasing power, Kamto says.
Well, Maurice Kamto, in his meeting equally, highlighted the Amazonian armed conflict, noting that there is a need for the conflict to be addressed and brought to an end. The said conflict has so far claimed over 40,000 lives and displaced more than 1 million southern Cameroonians, both internally and out of the country. This was the first time that the MRC party was given an authorization to hold such a meeting since the 2018 presidential elections. Several previous meetings organized by Kamto were either disrupted or his supporters were arrested. The MRC leader maintained that he is the winner of the 2018 presidential election in neighboring La République du Cameroon. According to him, Paul Biya and the Cameroon's People Democratic Movement (CPDM) party stole the victory from him. He concluded by saying that at this point, La République du Cameroon is being ruled by incompetent leaders.
Well, on to another interesting story of concern. The USA, a superpower today, thanks to the intelligence service. When intelligence can crack into any system and get classified information, it renders the latter vulnerable. Having a comprehensive knowledge of the tactics and means of operation of any enemy is essential for winning a fight. That is the more reason why to better destabilize or capture a gang, infiltrating the gang is always considered a vital option. Even when the Promised Land was a reserved space for the Israelites by God, they had to have forehand knowledge of the land before venturing into it.
While the Holy Scriptures states in the book of Numbers 13 and the 17th verse that Moses sent forth men to spy on the land of Canaan. With the ongoing war in southern Cameroon's Amazonia, one might be tempted to see or consider La République du Cameroon's tactics only from the military options perspective, which is not true. La République du Cameroon, before the advent of open confrontations in 2016, had already put in place strategies to cage southern Cameroon's Amazonia. Even within the year, those strategies are systematically being implemented. Knowledge of all these strategies and developing a plan to contain them is vital for the struggle. All this is for La Republic of Cameroon to have control over the people of Southern Cameroon. What are different strategies of La Republic of Cameroon to maintain control over Amazonia?
Well, this report exposes the colonial tactics ever since southern Cameroon was colonized by French Cameroon through the influence of Crook, France, and Britain, compiled by a right-thinking Amazonia. Now, I said, compiled by a right-thinking Amazonia, he says to control a people, you must make them impudent by destroying everything empowering them. Example, the Tico and Bafut Airport, Amba Training Center, Highway Construction Company, Victoria Deep Seaport, WARC, Marketing Board, and Power Camp, and more.
Well, to control a people, you must impose rulers on them. Proxy groups in our revolution sponsored by our opponents. To control a people, you must control their narratives, like their history, platforms, and other social media outlets. To control a people, you must destroy their culture, identity, history, heritage. That's why our system of government was destroyed. To control a people, you must control their funds and chiefs. That's what neighboring La Republic du Cameroon is doing in our territory, buying our funds and chiefs and using them against our people. This very method is being used on political church leaders from southern Cameroon's extraction.
And he says that's what La République du Cameroon and her master have been doing to our people since 1961. Southern Cameroons. Now, he says Amazonians must make sure we stop La République and her master from doing the following mentioned above. The writer added that La République du Cameroon and her master are fighting us on multiple fronts, so we must do everything to contain them. Education is power. We thought this very insightful, why we brought it to your knowledge.
All right, and moving on. The colonial La Republic de Cameroon annexation is Yaoundé junta changes tactics as the colonial La Republic de Cameroon deal of Nguti local government area assigns traditional rulers to mobilize population for the May 20th, a day of national mourning across Amaland. Well, information getting to ABC Amber TV says the colonial La Republic de Cameroon DU of Ngute, local government area in Coupe Monanguba County, in the Atlantic Zone, in a communique dated May 8, 2023, has called on all traditional rulers and quarterheads, that is, all royal beggars, in his administrative unit to mobilize their population to massively turn out for a May 20th celebration, a day chosen by former La Republic of Cameroon dictator Amadou Ahidjo as their so-called national day, for it was the birthday of his wife.
The colonial La République du Cameroon's DO of Ngute, seeing the complication in celebrating such an event outlawed by the people's interim government, hands off the annexationists, neighboring La République du Cameroon's involvement and places the burden on traditional rulers who have all been transformed to royal beggars by the Yaoundé corrupt CPDM syndicate to carry the cross by mobilizing the population to turn out on May 20th celebrations. In recent past, it was the colonial La Republic du Cameroon's governor Okalia Belai who calls Amazonian cats, rats, dogs, and cockroaches, who ordered that chiefs would not only have to mobilize their population for the occasion, but would also line up with them at the ceremonial ground with placards.
To the Yaoundé colonial administration, void of basic tenets of Anglo-Saxon tradition. This inadmissible and scandalous demand was probably a strategy to ensure each traditional ruler effectively mobilized their population for the occasion. Well, fortunately, there was a public outcry against the demand, which made a big mockery of our traditional rulers who have been turned royal beggars by the Njuba marriage. Regrettably, the communique issued by the colonial D of Unguti local government era shows how the Yaoundé administration continues to push our chiefs of funds into trouble under the pretext that traditional rulers are auxiliaries of such obnoxious colonial administration because of their 50,000 francs CFA stipends they receive monthly from the La Republique de Cameroon colonial state coffers.
Well, on the sidelines, and paradoxically, the local colonial La Republique du Cameroon's administration, mainly CPDM pages that do receive money from Yaoundé, as well as from external elites in the name of the local organizing teams for the May 20th celebration in their different colonial La Republique du Cameroon administrative units will sit behind and push royal beggars into trouble, calling on them to mobilize the population. Because of fear, empty pride, and arrogance of the colonial La Republique du Cameroon, local administrators opt to exploit so called traditional rulers, most of whom have served ties with their subjects. They've cut ties with their subject, many of whom have disgracefully reduced themselves to errand boys or servants to these local colonial administrators. Yaoundé colonial authorities cannot contact these chiefs individually or privately, at least for the sake of their safety.
Well, it is certain that the ARFs are usual and as punctual will puncture the celebration of May 20th, better still, the 51st anniversary of their National Day of Mourning in their different local government areas and counties across Amberland. The decision by the Colonial DA of Nguti to issue such a communique can be said to be reckless as it only helps to expose the chiefs in the Nguti local government area to become the target of the wounded ARFs. Nguti local government area is actively in the Ambazonia War of Independence.
And another wonder we're having is if it's because the Yaoundé CPDM authorities in the war to Amazonia is claiming that things are returning to normalcy. Is this an act to put out normalcy to the world because no reasonable person can judge the present situation on the ground across Amazonia only by looking at local government areas like Victoria, Tico, Boya, and Nkambe? In reality, these local government areas have never been severely hit by the escalation of the war, except as regards the influx of the internally displaced persons.
All right, and moving on. It is commonplace in the land of the living to see that those who steal to just survive are being lynched, whereas those who, with a well to do abilities, steal and are promoted instead. This is a reality with the Colonial Republic of Cameroon's government. Well, a young man is killed or thrown into jail for picking someone's pockets, whereas the La Republic de Cameroon's government administration, you empty the coffers of the state or divert money for developmental projects into their private pockets. In essence, big fishes are protected while small fishes are killed. The Colonial La Republic of Cameroon Minister of Transport has just been slammed a month suspension on the travel agency Tourist Express after an accident involving one of the agency's buses with 14 deaths and many injured.
Well, this window dressing strategy is typical of the La Republic of Cameroon's government. The colonial minister failed to consider those who had the responsibility of putting the different roads in good condition. The nature of the roads is the prime reason for the numerous road accidents, yet the minister bypassed or better ignored his friends who failed to do their homework on the roads to sanction a travel agency. Will the suspension of this agency prevent further accidents, with the nature of these bad roads especially? Why not bring to book those La Republic du Cameroon government officers who are diverting money for the road construction into their private coffers?
Oh well, the Colonial La Republic du Cameroon Minister of Transport, Jean-Ernest Massina, has been suspended or had suspended the Tourisque Express Urban Transportation Agency for 1 month for a serious breach of regulation which led to their most recent accident. Q Express bus was involved in a ghastly accident on the 9th of May 2023 along the Maiganga Garwa Balai Road, which led to the death of 14 people. The suspension was made public in a press release signed by La Republique de Cameroon's Minister of Transport on the 11th of May 2023.
Well, according to the release, the suspension is a result of a, quote, breach of the regulations in force having led to an accident with material and bodily damage as well as consequent loss of human life. According to reports, the driver had fallen asleep and lost control of the vehicle, finishing its run in the field. The Express Touristic Agency bus, which was involved in the accident, was said to be traveling towards Ngaoundere when the tragic incident took place. The 14 dead, including 7 men, a 10-year-old child, and 7 women. 19 other persons who were injured were evacuated to the integrated health center of Bindiba. In this light, the agency has been slammed a 1 month suspension, which, according to the colonial minister, is possibly renewable.
Well, some critics have pointed out that the responsibility for such accidents also lies with the neighboring La République de Cameroon's government, which has failed to construct modern roads between cities. All right, here is a video of a critic saying that the Minister of Transportation suspension is really not necessary. Now, let's get that soundbite.
Suite à l'accident de circulation survenu le 9 mai sur l'axe Garouamboula-Ngaoundéré,
After the accident that took place along the Menganga Garabulai stretch of road, the LRC Minister of Transport never visited the scene where that accident took place, but straight to suspend Touristic Express. This is terrible. If there is anybody that has to be suspended, that should be those who diverted massive funds meant for the construction of these same roads.
Massivement l'argent destiné à faire ces mêmes routes qu'il fallait traquer. Nous connaissons ici dehors les agences qui font pratiquement un accident par semaine sans être inquiétés.
Some agencies are involved in accidents every week and are never suspended. Camrail, in one accident, killed more than the totality of all the people who died from an accident involving Touristic Express since inception, yet it was never suspended.
Voir sa décision car Touristic Express, au-delà de son rôle d'agence de voyage,
I call on the colonial minister to revise his decision. But Touristic Express is not only involved in transportation, but is equally taking part in the development of the entire northern region. So by grace, Mr. Minister, don't cut the branch on which you're sitting.
Ne sciez pas la branche sur laquelle vous êtes assis. Je vous remercie.
Have it. With that, we've come to the end of this fresh news for today. We'll go in straight to the recap proper. For the recap, we'll start with the Kondegi walls falling down, Kondegi principal prison walls falling down. Confirmations with a video shows the wall of the principal prison Kondegi Yaoundé in the colonial La Republic du Cameroon capital collapsed. The video of a tornado that swept across parts of La Republic du Cameroon yesterday morning, causing enormous damages. On this happened on Monday morning, and it blew down buildings, trees, bridges, and more. And it is not yet clear if some prisoners took advantage of the opportunity of these collapsed walls of the prison to seize their freedom, which certainly must be the case. Well, undaunted, reliable sources brought to you that all detainees currently were locked inside the prison wall that gave way, stretches about 40 meters long.
Well, on Monday, we told you that the Buyi Warriors, the Ambazonia Restoration Forces elite squad from Oko local government area, inflicted high casualties on La Republic du Cameroon's terrorist soldiers stationed at the colonial prison, and they called for helicopter backup for evacuation. The ARF say they want to remind La Republic du Cameroon terrorist soldiers that our territory will remain ungovernable till our stolen statehood is finally restored. Well, they also screamed aloud to say no to colonial activities in southern Cameroon's territory.
Yes, 27-year-old Anye Ndeunso worked for an, a radio station and for a newspaper as bureau chief and member of the Cameroon Association of English-speaking Journalists, abbreviated Kama said, an ABC Amba TV sources adds to this report that he was caught by a stray bullet at at Don Simon, a popular snack bar around Chase Street in Tarincon, Bamenda local government area, where he equally worked as an animator. The Cameroon Association of English-speaking journalists, Kamasej, confirmed Nso's death and called for an investigation. But in a televised address on Monday, Capo Daniel confirmed that his hit squad was responsible for killing the journalist, claiming that they had been targeting a La Republic colonial military commander who regularly visited the bar in which Anye, the journalist, was shot. The public believed otherwise, as Anye was an animator at Don Simon snack bar with a microphone and could not be mistaken for a military. Anye died on the spot after being shot in the chest at Don Simon's snack bar on Sunday, May 7th, where he worked as an animator. Journalists and journalism associations have been mourning and condemning this killing, many describing him as a gentleman and a promising journalist.
Another interesting story we had this week was the story of Ndogo Youth, who faked his military affiliation with, who was caught this week, alongside other atrocities tied to his relationship with an Ngo Ntang Theris specialized in child trafficking. She recruits young girls and sends them to health facilities to steal newborn babies, which were their stock in trade. Now, from the relationship, Ndogoyevs met Madame Yobe, who specialized in charms and other magical instruments like chains, which they used to place on tombs, invoke either dead bodies or empty coffins to appear, and they appear for them to carry out their diabolic missions.
And on Monday was another international press conference as pressmen from across the world participated. Representatives from Brazil, Nigeria, Ghana, and neighboring La Republic du Cameroon were present. Some of the questions asked were on annexation, referendum, the United Nations, and future moves. And of course, we had the president of the Federal Republic of Amazonia give an elaborate exposition on all matters.
Well, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, disclosed the death toll, which could be higher since the figures are for the period covering January to March 2023. UNICEF reported that during the period, no less than 187 people had been injured in the clashes. UNICEF is saying 187 people, but we know that they are more. Well, they perpetrated by the colonial Republic of Cameroon's barbaric genocidal occupier military in daily confrontations with the Ambazonia Restoration Forces. Within the same period, under review by UNICEF, some 539 people were arrested during the colonial Republic of Cameroon military searches or operations across Ambaland. The UNICEF survey adds that within this same period, at least 10 lockdown days were imposed and observed, during which official events organized by La Republic of Cameroon's colonial government, and that most local governments across the Ambazonians continue to comply with the ongoing one-day ghost towns instituted by the interim government. Statistics that show a high negotiation and negation to normalcy in both Cameroons.
Speaking of negation to normalcy, we brought to you how schools in Kembong Manfei local government area have been suffering the fate of many in the conflict-hit Amazonia, which have been abandoned due to the insecurity of students, teachers, and their families. Kembong is a village in the Manu County in the Midlands where the barbaric colonial Republic of Cameroon's military first set houses ablaze, chasing denizens to the unknown. The local government area is one of the hardest hit areas in Ambazonia as a result of the raging armed conflict, the Ambazonian War of Independence. Well, it's unfortunate that life has not been normal in Kembong since the escalation of the conflict, and schools have remained closed with no hopes of resumption in sight.
Well, in the Atlantic zone of Amazonia, the Bande, Mine 14 in Boyer is on the spotlight again. This time, the discovery of the lifeless body of a young girl. The girl, said to be a student of government secondary school, the Banda, was found lifeless on the banks of the Beno stream, lying half naked. She was seen with rape evidence and her hands tied and her head butchered. The perpetrators of the gruesome act remains unknown and in the wild at the moment.
Well, there is a video in circulation of a young La Republic du Cameroon agent who was instigating hatred against Amazonian refugees in Yaoundé, the colonial capital of La Republic du Cameroon. Amazonian refugees in La Republic du Cameroon only left their localities due to La Republic military excesses in Amazonia, not knowing that even in La Republic du Cameroon, they are not safe as well.
While on the international scene, we told you that Ukrainian officials say air defenses drowned 15 Russian cruise missiles which were launched overnight in capital Kyiv. Ukraine's military said it destroyed 23 of 25 cruise missiles launched across the country. Ukraine seems to be measuring up with the height Russia is throwing at her.
Well, the BRICS nation, consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are said to be a bloc of economically similar countries that have been making headlines lately due to allegations of an imminent expansion. According to reports, more than a dozen nations, including some African countries, have expressed interest in joining the group. Remember, one of the primary goals of the BRICS nation is to create a new global currency that will rival the US dollar.
But dollar personal finance expert and a best-selling author Dave Ramsey has dismissed the dollarization concerns and the prospect of a BRICS currency. The Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble displacing the US dollar in their international trade. In his words, he says they don't have the muscle to take down the dollar. Ramsey is an eight-time national best-selling author, sold more than 11 million copies, a self-proclaimed personal money management expert who also calls himself America's trusted voice on money, said China, Russia, and Brazil are the three main in these. Ramsey explained that China, Russia, and Brazil are the three main players in this. They don't use the US dollars as their basis of international trade. While he emphasized that the three countries have their own currencies and there is a conversion rate between each of these currency and the US dollar is that conversion rate.
Still in Amazonia, another lifeless body was found of Visha Roland Kidze, who was picked out of the Wuri River in the colonial economic capital of La Republic, Douala. He was a successful car parts dealer at the Camp Yabasi locality in Douala, and investigations have been opened by security forces to determine why and exactly how Unfomi Visha Roland Kidze found himself in the Wuri River in Douala.
Well, this week as well, a man from Lassen, non local government area, Bui County, was beaten to death for urinating in someone's land in Yaoundé. Another from Nkambe, local government area, Dongo Mountain County, was killed in Douala for urinating on a francophone man's ward. Many Amazonians, mostly motorcycle riders, are being killed on a regular basis. Meantime, hate speech has moved from just that to xenophobia. Well, with that, we've come to the end of Undaunted Weekly Recap. Well, Steph, how are you?
I'm very well. And we'll leave you with ABC Amba TV Majors. Good night and God bless you.
Payment method: www.abcambertv.com/donate. ABC Amber TV payment channels: Cash App 202-650-2216, Zelle 240-486-8768, Amazonia Broadcasting Corporation. PayPal donations at abcambertv.com. For more details, call +124 028 43 111. You can email us at info@abcambertv.com.